Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here this afternoon. We got a little bit of a panel discussion, I guess, or
something like that.
Something like that. So the title of this one is Successful Flutter Replatforming, the Path for Betterment. I think that Sam here, as we'll get into it from Betterment, has an incredible story of taking a large, complicated application, native applications, and converting them over to Flutter. So we wanted to share some of that insight with you guys today. Yeah. So first, why don't you?
Oh, I'll go first.
Yeah, go.
Okay. So I'm Sam Moore. I'm VP of Architecture at Betterment. I've been doing software development for a little bit over 15 years, and I've worked at Betterment for the last 11. I don't know. That's what I got.
Cool. And I'm David DeRemer, so founder and CEO of Very Good Ventures. And so today we're going to hear from Sam and talk to him about his experiences at Betterment. So to start, do you want to tell us a little bit about Betterment and the app?
Yeah. So Betterment is the largest independent digital financial advisor. We're based in the US. Our product is 3 different products, actually. One that's direct to consumers, which is Betterment.com, and our mobile app experience, which is built in Flutter. And then Betterment at Work, which is our 401k product that we sell to employers and employees for employee benefits. And then we also have Betterment Advisor Solutions, which is a product that we sell to registered financial advisors to manage their client bases.
And what's the, can you give us a general sense of like the technology stack and sort of how that platform grew and how you delivered value?
Yeah. So we started as just one line of business, which is Betterment.com, and our mobile experience came a little bit while later. We sell digital investment platform that does automated investing for our customers. The technology was originally built in Java, mostly, and has over the years gone through many transformations. We're using today Java on the back end, Ruby on Rails on the back end, React on the web front end, and Flutter on the mobile front end.
And with some success, right? So one of the things I wanted to call out and talk about, 500,000 downloads, 4.7 star reviews in both app stores, right? That's pretty good, right? Yeah. I mean, a lot of ratings, a lot of good ratings, and built with Flutter, which is fantastic. So definitely wanted to get in today a little bit about your experience making that transition. And so maybe to start our conversation, do you want to get into some of what led you to thinking about that you needed to do something? And how did you embark on that journey of figuring out, A, you needed to do something, what to do, and eventually getting into Flutter?
Yeah, so when to start? Well, let's go all the way back to pre-pandemic times, 2019. At that point in time, we had a Betterment mobile experience that was native on iOS and Android. We were using, some combination of Objective-C and Swift, some combination of Java and Kotlin, no Swift UI, no Jetpack Compose, just the old school way of doing it. And our business was looking at our customer base and the sort of shifting dynamics of our customers. And we noticed that more and more of our customers were consistently using our product on mobile. So that was our mobile app, but also a lot on mobile web. And we hypothesized that many of our customers were using mobile web because they wanted to use mobile, but our mobile app didn't have all the same features that our web experience did. At the time, we kind of had this concept of the mobile experience, whether it was intentional or just sort of happenstance, as like a companion application. So the main product we built was a web experience. Lots of people want to do finance stuff on their computer, maybe that was a millennial thing, I'm not totally sure. Big problems for big screens, right? That's the thing that people say. But what we were finding was that gap was meaning that our customers weren't as well served as we wanted them to be, where they were using our product. So the business wanted to look at figuring out how going into 2020, we could make it sort of the year of mobile first. We would start building our products and our product features on mobile first, or at least in conjunction with the features we were building on web. So they said, okay, how will we execute that strategy? They talked to our engineering leadership, got me involved, and I went and talked to our mobile engineers and said, hey, we have this really ambitious plan. We're going to build 12 features on mobile first next year. And they were like, That's going to be hard. How many features is that a month? That's one feature a month? I don't think that we can really do that. So I wanted to figure out how to not say to the business, no, we're not going to be able to do that. Like, that's not an option. And that kind of sparked, our curiosity to start thinking about, well, what would we do? Like, do we just have to give up and say, like, there's no way we could do that? Maybe we can't do something where we can deliver all 12 features that we might want to deliver, but how many of them can we deliver, and like, what strategic change might we want to make in order to be able to do that?
And before we get into the solution, can you dig into a little bit some of the problems you're facing? Because I think other companies might be facing those problems and feel trapped by a lot of those same issues. And I think getting to the root cause of how you get there and identifying those problems, I think, is a big part of getting to the solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, maybe many of you don't have this experience right now, but maybe you've had it in the past. But we had a 8-year-old mobile code base, so it was pretty old. It had been around from like the early days of Android and the earlier days of iOS. It had gone through the hands of many different engineers over time. It had gone through these evolutions of the trends of software development and patterns. We had 2 different MVP patterns we were using on Android. We had some MVVM patterns happening. We had recently, at the time, completed like an iOS sort of refactoring to adopt a bunch of different improved patterns. But like cumulatively, one of the engineers I talked to sort of referred to the state of our mobile application code bases as having accumulated these like lava layers. And it's this idea that like the hot new idea emerges from the volcano, and it like comes to bear on the landscape of your code base. And then it like, maybe it's great and wonderful for a minute, and then you try to do more things with it, and it's kind of like it ossifies, right? Or it hardens, and oh, that's not really great strategy anymore. We learned better. And then so you try the next one. And then over time, like, you've completely different landscape. You want to plow your fields or whatever, and you're plowing through all these different layers of challenges. Different features aren't built the same way. New engineers coming on board can't figure out which way is up. It just ended up becoming a state of like, you could work effectively in the code base, but you really had to learn it first and know what you're doing. And that ultimately accumulated to, most of our mobile engineers looking at a product plan that's like, let's do all these ambitious features on mobile, and said like, we would love to meet those expectations, but the state of our code base is just not really ready for that.
And I would imagine that creates a big issue for the business at that point, like the other non-technical stakeholders saying, hey, we need to ship this stuff, and why is it taking so long?
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't like we didn't have great engineers. We also had a lot of really good engineers. They were the ones that were actively solving these problems while still managing to deliver important features that we wanted to deliver. We were well resourced. It was a good setup that we had. It was just the code bases were really dragging us down.
I think that's a good point, right? Because I think despite good resourcing, in parentheses on the slide there, is a good call out. It's not necessarily with result of bad people, right? Or not enough people. That sometimes with good resourcing, really strong engineers, it's just these things they build up. The lava layers build, and people come and go out of an organization as well. So someone who laid the layer 3 layers deep, they're not even around anymore. And so how do you make sense of that, right?
Yeah.
So let's get into then how you picked Flutter and how you got to that choice and the journey from identifying that, we got a problem and it's impacting the business. And so how do you go forward to evaluating a choice generally maybe, and then getting into Flutter specifically?
Yeah, so when we were thinking about what our options were, we looked and said, okay, well, the most obvious thing that everyone's going to suggest, and everyone did suggest, is like, well, we should find a way to rewrite the Android stuff. We should find a way to rewrite the iOS stuff. Like, we like this expression, or at least I like it, but I think I say it to enough people that hopefully they like it too, but like, never waste a crisis, right? And so this was like a moment for the business where they were like, what can you do? And so as a technologist, you're like, oh, wow, like your eyes start lighting up. You're thinking about all the crazy ideas that you could maybe figure out how to make palatable that wouldn't, under normal circumstances, be as palatable. So as I said before, the first thing that comes to mind is like, well, let's just rewrite it. There's plenty of literature on why rewrites usually fail. And most of the time, that's when they're kind of like ground up and isolated rewrites. And so we were looking at that and saying, okay, well, we have some experience doing rewrites for back-end technology. We have some belief that there's ways to do it that won't be a catastrophic bad business decision or technology decision. But also, do we want to do two of those at the same time? And we looked around at the market, and like there was a lot of evidence that was showing that cross-platform development was growing in popularity. It had kind of gone through, kind of a lot of growing pains over the years. I think React Native was sort of finally on the upswing that it's been on for a while, where it was like not maligned and hated by everyone all the time anymore. The Airbnb, use case was like, maybe disproven as like not as much of a problem anymore. So anyway, we started looking at opening up that solution space and saying, hey, should we explore cross-platform as the solution?
And so you looked across this, and native was an option, all these different solutions. And so how do you go about, you have KMP, you have React Native, you have Flutter, and maybe at this stage you have choices. You actually have options, whereas at some point maybe it was kind of only React Native, maybe Xamarin in there a little bit. How do you then go about determining which tool to use?
Yeah, so it was sort of a, the thing that every engineer wants to do is be like, okay, I have like a green field here that I get to play with, figure out like, how should I start anew, right? And that was going to be obviously sort of complicated because it was sort of a brownfield transformational thing that we were going to end up eventually doing. But you kind of get to maybe pick a new tool, or at least validate that the tools that you're using are still the right tools for the job. And we looked at the landscape, Kotlin multi-platform, React Native, Flutter. I don't think we seriously looked at Xamarin because I had some mildly negative experiences with it in the past, even though I'm a big .NET fan. But anyway, we went and said to ourselves, like, okay, how would we evaluate? Should we do a bake-off? Should we try a bunch of technologies? Should we see, can we build a feature in all of them? Do we have a sense of what better looks like, right? And so we started like asking ourselves those questions, and through the process of answering them, we kind of came up with this idea of doing a pilot, putting together evaluation criteria to understand, how would we know if the thing that we picked or among the options we were exploring, they were actually going to solve the problems that we had and maybe help us avoid the same pitfalls that we had fallen in previously. Ultimately, we picked Flutter initially as the thing to explore because we hadn't explored it yet, and we had done some exploration with Kotlin multi-platform. I think we talked to some people, that we had been working with as consultants or contractors that had experience with it. We had tried React Native, a couple of years before. We kind of knew what the story was there, but we had never really given Flutter a chance. We heard from some people in our network that Flutter was showing a lot of promise, that it was becoming more popular, that more companies were making that decision to try it out. And so we grabbed a few people, we explored it for like a week near the end of the year, slow time in product delivery life cycles. And we found, like, just from the very beginning that a lot of things that you can take for granted, like just installing it and like getting it set up in your IDE, just worked really well. And if you've used, I don't know, the JavaScript tool chain, I'm not here to make fun of React Native. I actually really like React Native, but and I like JavaScript and TypeScript, despite how anyone who knows me will tell you I crap all over it all the time. Because a lot of the tools are just really unpleasant to use. A lot of the times when they don't work correctly, it requires you to go really deep down the rabbit hole to figure out how to fix them. And we didn't get that impression from Flutter at first. We got the exact opposite impression. It installed. It was kind of like a delightful little, CLI UI that it had. It had an extension for IntelliJ or whatever, Android Studio, that our developers are already familiar with. It worked in VS Code, which I was familiar with as more of a full stack developer. And that started to win our hearts over a lot.
So the onboarding was super important because it helped you get started, right?
Yeah.
Helped you get in. And just for context, this was, again, end of 2019, early 2020. Yeah. So this was a long time ago. Like, I think we're kind of glossing over the fact that also at that stage, this was not a safe choice necessarily.
Yeah, it was definitely, at the time, and you talked about this in your keynote, right? And there a couple other people have talked about it, but there was the specter of, is it killed by Google.com, right? Is Flutter going to end up there? And it was a serious thing. Like I would say it's 9 out of 10 of the mobile engineers that heard about Flutter said, seriously, they're gonna kill it. Like, they have Android, why would they do this? And so there was a lot of that discussion to be had, and it ended up weighing, maybe more heavily than I think it should have in retrospect in our decision making. But I don't know if you want to talk about how we overcame the concern that Google was going to kill it, but it was certainly a big piece of the puzzle, was just sort of saying like, okay, so wait, what would actually happen if they killed it, right? It won't just disappear, right? If we're going to go through this process of re-architecting and adopting it, like, yeah, we might find ourselves then at the end of the line, I don't know how many years down the line, saying, hey, maybe we need to re-architect again because the platform that we're using, it died or something. Or maybe it's going to get picked up by other companies. Maybe the community is going to grow. Maybe it's going to turn into maybe more of what React Native looks like. So when you look at the different eventualities that could present themselves, they're not all like, the worst version of risk where you're just like, well, this is going to be a huge, terrible mistake. Another piece that I was reminded of when we were talking about some of this the other day is also just like, a lot of companies don't really need to worry about that. They don't know how long their technology is going to last. So like startups, right? More startups are adopting these things, and that's actually good for the community because it's just a bigger user base. That enriches the community, makes it more durable, makes it unlikely or less likely for some of those eventualities to come to pass. And as we explored the community and we met you all at VGV, we started to get more of a sense of like, well, there's something here. So even if the main benefactor were to disappear, like, it started to already seem less likely that was like the biggest risk to worry about. It's more like, can we even do it?
Yeah, it's funny. I have an anecdote around, we had a silly little kids app. It was a little fake chat app we built. And I had this thing, because people would say that, right? Google's going to kill it. And like, when you think about these time horizons, and I remember we didn't touch it for like 3 years, and then we opened it up and it just worked.
Yeah.
On the newest version of iOS, like, we didn't even update Flutter, I don't think. And I was just like, so even if they had, like, that was a time capsule where, like, imagine there were no more updates at all. But guess what? The app still worked, So it's like, what timeline are you looking at? What are you actually trying to do? And all those things really matter. Yeah. So, one of the things is making the technical choice. But you mentioned startups. I think startups, they can make a risky choice.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of people to convince. They don't have to motivate a lot of resources or change teams or culture. You're in a large organization with an app in production, servicing hundreds of thousands of people, a lot of money going through this, financial services. It's a big deal. You can't just like decide, hey, let's just completely try something brand new that's risky that not a lot of other people have done. Which again, I think to underscore at that time, this was not a safe bet necessarily on the surface. So how do you convince management, the business, like the leadership and the people who are writing the checks at the end of the day? How do you convince them to go down something that is not going to be an easy process? It's going to be a long journey and with a lot of complexity and risk. How do you get them on board?
Yeah, well, it's the thing that we actually try to coach a lot of our product engineers on a lot, just in terms of managing technical debt, which I think there's a talk on that somewhere happening in this conference another time, which is probably worth checking out. But it's about figuring out how to connect it to business value as quickly as you can, right? And so for us, we needed to find a way to say, like, how can we reduce the risk? So there's all sorts of risk tied up in this, but like replatforming it all is a risk. And the business is going to say, like, well, what happens if it fails? Or how likely is it going to fail? Or is it to fail? Things like that. So what we wanted to do was be able to find a way to reframe the proposal to our business, and in a way that we could say, like, well, here, make this much of an investment and we can show you what the return is. And then we can talk about whether there's motivation to go further. Right? And this kind of developed over time in the years that I had worked at Betterment and worked with people who'd come from other companies where they'd done similar technology transformations into this concept that we refer to as like the life cycle of a tech investment, and trying to sort of frame that up for the more financially minded or business minded people on our exec team or whatever as like, okay, so all we're asking for right now is like Sam's time to explore this thing and figure out if there's anything there. Then we're going to maybe come back and say, yes, there is. Can we get a handful of engineers and build a pilot feature? What will we learn from that? We would have to kind of frame that up for the business and say, oh, well, we're going to learn how long it takes to do a thing. Is it actually as good as we think it is from an engineering perspective? And if we can do that and get that learning while also building something that delivers more immediate value for the business, like a real product feature, even if we don't like it and we have to throw it out later, like that's an investment that you make. Like we make these decisions all the time when we pick an open source library and build a feature using it and then realize like after we finish shipping the feature, dear God, we're not going to use that library for the next feature, right? But like we don't immediately get the chance to go in and rip it out, right? But each of those things is similar. It's a micro investment. This is maybe a little bit more of a macro. But that's like the framework that we tried to introduce to our business team. We talked to them about how like what's going to look like. It's going to be slowing down to speed up, right? We're going to start by doing exploration. We're going to do a pilot. If we get there, then we're going to say like, okay, so now we know that there's like a promised land that we're headed toward, but we actually have to teach everybody how to do this thing. We have to teach everybody how to use this platform. We have to actually figure out how to integrate it to be the innovation center for building new features. We have to figure out how to get people that are doing feature development right now to transition over to it and not lose too many strides along the way. But also I think for business people, when they hear us sort of making a plan that goes kind of far out 6-9 months into the future and they see what the steps are, like it's almost like a business plan, right? It's like a pitch. It's kind of like, hey, invest in this. Like we're taking this seriously. We're not just thinking about picking a new shiny object off the rack and saying like, yeah, this is going to solve all our problems. We're laying out the costs and we're laying out the benefits.
And I think what you guys are doing there that is super vital, and it's been a theme in some of the talks that I've heard and have given, is like making sure the business is involved, right? Yeah. I think part of it is building consensus with them along the way. As engineers, we tend to think about the tooling, the technology, the cool benefits of what it's going to do for our developer experience. I mean, it kind of started with that, like, oh, look how easy that was to install. And no, it's a joy to use in the tools I like. But you know, the CFO maybe doesn't care as much about that, or even understands it. They might understand the value of having happy developers, but maybe they don't understand the real implications of the tools and the choices. So you're bringing them in and giving them like a breadcrumb of like how to get to the result and involving them in that process so they don't feel blindsided by needing to write some massive investment.
Right. Being able to show them, you know, some version of twice as many features with the same number of people, right? Or whatever, you know, flavor of glass half full, glass half empty you want to think about with cross-platform development. Being able to show them what that actually means, right? Show them that that might actually be real, and incorporate them into that decision, right? That it's not a decision that they're just having to trust us with. If you go to the business and say, just trust me, like it's very rarely going to be that they actually do, right? Like that would probably most of the time be a unusual business decision.
Just like, trust me, bro, I got this. Yeah, I think that's super important because a lot of the perception, I would assume, of some of these are that this is going to be very expensive. It's going to take a very long time. We're going to slow our product pace because we're going to take resources away from our normal progression. Oh, by the way, why didn't you guys just do this right the first time? You know, but like it's the truth is, it's
asking myself that same question.
But I mean, I guess the point is like as engineers, we understand how those lava layers get built, you know, and the business maybe doesn't sometimes. So I think in a way what you're kind of doing is just giving them, you're bringing them into the process, you're giving them steps and giving them a plan where you're not asking also for a $5 million investment over 3 years on day one. Because who's going to say yes to that, right? You need to give them a pathway. So let's dig into that a little bit. You mentioned this life cycle of a tech investment. I just think this was really cool. It's a model that I think a lot of companies could follow for not just Flutter, which is key. I want to touch on that a little bit. But yeah, can you take us through this sort of life cycle that you've developed with Betterment?
Yeah. So this like diagram or slide or whatever is something that we kind of laid out when trying to talk to our like, you know, the business part of the business, the executive team and others, on how to think about these things like in an evergreen capacity. Like I said before that like there's so many of these things that you make on a micro level as an engineer that you have the agency to make, but there's many more of them that are often bigger, more impactful decisions that you can't make on your own. They either need consensus among a group of people that is larger than just your department, or they depend on a decision maker that isn't you. And in our case, that's, you know, the CEO or the exec team or whoever decides, you know, how to allocate the budget. And so, as David said, we had done a few of these sort of technology transformations in the time that I worked at Betterment. When I started, I think I mentioned this before, we used Java for the back-end stuff. A lot of that software was written by our CEO, who wasn't like a engineer by trade. He wasn't bad at it, but certainly he wasn't as good at it as I was. Pat myself on the back. But that does produce like a different quality of outcome, right? And so we said, for one of those journeys we were on earlier before Flutter, like we need to do a transformation. We didn't have this framework at the time, so we did, the best thing that we could. But looking backward, we saw a lot of the same qualities in that decision-making process. Which were like looking at the opportunities that were out there and saying like, what if we were to pursue cross-platform development instead of a native rewrite twice in two places? What would that look like? Is there a benefit to that? Are there platforms that are good? Then we advocated for being able to do an exploration. These are kind of the phases. And that's where you reach this first decision point that's really important to kind of bring the business into, is saying like, we don't want to go any further. You don't even want to do a real exploration if you're not going to commit on some level to going further, right? It's like people can survive anything, but they can't survive like false summits. It's like you bring people together to be like, we're going to do this thing. And they're like, actually, no, we're not going to do that thing. And that just like crushes people's spirits, right? And what you need, right, in these moments is to like rally the troops behind a direction that you want. And that requires you to have support of the business to be able to pull that off. So anyway, never begin explorations that you're not going to finish is definitely an important takeaway that we had. And so that's where like there's this decision point. Cool. I mentioned before what the decision or exploration looked like and how we went forward. We decided, okay, we think this technology is real. We think there's something to do with it. How can we further sort of reduce the risk and minimize the investment that we're making from the business's perspective to see, that, they're willing to take that bet. And that was where we came up with the idea of doing a pilot, building a real feature, pulling together a small group of resources, bringing in expertise, which we can talk about later, to help make sure that we would maximize the chance that we were getting the most out of the resources and the time that we had for the pilot, and bringing in some sort of evaluation criteria to tell us whether the pilot was successful. Just building and delivering a thing, as probably many of you know, like you can do it by hook or by crook, right? But like when you're doing this kind of thing, you don't want to just make it successful. You want to know that the success is something that's going to breed further success because you're trying to make a transformational investment. So those were like kind of the big early stages, right? And then it's like, if your pilot is successful, you need to then be able to have that commitment to rolling it out, doing adoption. And that can take a lot of time, right? I have some on the slide, like some time frames here that are in maybe sort of slightly big corp terms. Some startups probably can't imagine spending something that takes 1 to 4 quarters or something. But like, that's just how long it takes when you have 400, 500 screens in your mobile app, dozens and dozens of features, tons of engineers, different roadmap priorities, different streams of work happening at all at the same time. And you need to retrain all those people to use a new technology strategy. You need to make continuous improvements to that technology platform as you're going, and not stop shipping product features. So that's the first 4 phases that are the majority of the work, and then there's the legacy cleanup phase, is what we call it, or the everybody likes to come to the party, but nobody likes to stay and clean up. If you don't get through the cleanup phase, you never find yourself actually yielding all the benefits of the transformation you were trying to achieve in the first place. So like that, zooming back out for a second, like when you do a pilot, you get a taste of the benefit, right? Maybe the product development of building your first feature in Flutter has the hot reloading thing that you were looking for, and you get to do it all fresh, and you get to use the cute new tools, and you really like it, and it just feels really good, and you deliver it maybe faster because you deliver it on 2 platforms at once. That's a taste of the benefit, and the business hopefully can get a taste of that too, not just the engineers. Then the rollout phase, you start to get more of it, but you're still living in this like hybrid world. Especially for us, we used add to app, which we can talk about, and so you're still feeling some of the pain of your lava layers of your legacy technology, but you're starting to get more of the benefits of the Flutter strategy. But if you never get through the cleanup phase, then you're always going to kind of live in that halfway or partway state, and it might not be worth it for the business if you don't finish it.
And it sounds like if you don't follow a process like this, build in these decision points, these proof points, there's actually what you're getting, instead of decisions to move forward, you're creating opportunities for someone to just walk away.
True.
Because if you're starting to do it and you don't have the vision and the commitment to the cleanup and getting it through, and you're like, hey, wait, actually this is kind of worse in a way, because now we got this legacy code base and we got this Flutter stuff, and it's really difficult. But if you're not actually able to show the improvement and learn from it, maybe you get to the end, if you don't do that legacy cleanup and you don't get the results, maybe next time around you ask the business to do this, they're going to be like,
right,
because it didn't go. So we didn't get the results we expected last time.
Right. Yeah, it becomes another lava layer, right?
So I think you already talked about a lot of the things on this one. Time-wise, I don't know if there's anything on this one you want to call attention to that were sort of key. I'll call one. I thought the evaluation criteria was really important.
Yeah.
Because most people just think forge ahead with technology, but you guys took a really mindful approach to what you wanted to measure.
Yeah, well, and I think part of that was also like needing to recognize that we didn't want to like have our whole engineering team not want to work on the technology that we had chosen to replace what they were previously using. So like we needed a way to sort of in nerd terms, like agree that this other technology was good actually, right? So we came up with, by inviting in our like whole mobile team, like what are the dimensions that we care about evaluating in technology that we're trying to use to build features, and what does good look like? And then when we go through building these things, we're gonna take we took like an Android person and an iOS person, me and like some people from VGV, and we did the pilot. And so we had like the diverse perspectives. We had some backup of the, expertise of people who had already used Flutter. We could avoid common pitfalls and not waste time. But along the way, we then had the ability to kind of go back to our mobile engineers and be like, this is what we're doing. Like this thing that we thought was going to be valuable, it is, or it isn't. And yeah, the evaluation criteria was like a huge piece of sort of facilitating the conversation and like keeping people engaged, and then also knowing whether we had actually achieved what we were looking for.
And I think it's key to bring in, you brought in the business stakeholders, but also the development team, right? To get them on board. Because I think there's, all these great benefits, and you go to the flutter.dev website and you read all the marketing materials, and it's going to save so much time, right? And it's going to be so much better. And like maybe there's some disbelief, like, don't believe the hype, right? But by actually evaluating not just what the framework or the tools or the community say is good, but for your team, what matters? Like maybe something matters for your team that isn't aligned with the benefit of the community, and so that value is like not as important to you, that feature, right?
Yeah.
So bringing them in and having that evaluation criteria.
Yeah, there's different stages that you can be at as a company too when you're exploring this. Like for us, we set the evaluation criteria and said, we need to score, Flutter needs to score at least as well as the native platforms on these things. And if it does, for us, that means it's actually better, right? Because if it's as good as these as the native platforms, for these criteria, then, and we don't have to build 2 full features every single time, that's actually better for our business. And like, that made sense for us. It doesn't make sense necessarily for everybody. If your technology is spectacular and you're just looking at cross-platform as a way to cut costs or something, you might have set those goalposts differently.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about the impact. So you do this, you go through the process. It was a long journey, right? It took quite a bit of time. You did have the sort of add-to-app brownfield approach to kind of get there. But is the app pretty much fully Flutter at this stage?
Yeah, I think like we because we took the add-to-app approach, like there was such a long period of time where like we had our legacy, as we would call them, native applications, which are now basically just shells. They're pretty much the same as like if you do a Flutter create. There's some very subtle customization of things that we just haven't really needed to clean up yet. And we have like maybe 1 or 2 features that haven't been fully migrated over to Flutter. And that's really like because of lack of prioritization. They're not getting in the way. We're not like, feeling the pain of them existing. They're just like over in the corner and it's fine now. And we'll get rid of them when we get rid of them. But yeah, we've seen a lot of benefits from the transformation, right? Like, it took a while, but even as we were going through it, we kept finding new ways as we were doing the transformation to get more of the benefits sooner. I've mentioned a couple people I've talked to about this recently that like add to app is interesting. If you've ever played around with it, like you're still like running your Flutter stuff inside of a native application. And like that still has some of the slow, terrible qualities that can emerge, like compile times are slow, or like you're waiting, you have to use the Android Studio and iOS to launch your things. We found a little clever strategy, which was like run a standalone Flutter app and build like just enough of the skeleton of our app so you could launch features in it. And you had to do almost all your development just in Flutter. And then you would just drop it into the legacy apps to test it before you wanted to ship it, and you were all set. So those were some of the benefits that we found along the way, and they kind of accumulated to like in the way that we were taking on adopting Flutter to produce this sort of continuously high quality platform as we went. So by the time that we were done with, I don't know, even just teaching people how to use everything, we had also invested in like, it was really easy to build new features. We had like, some boilerplate generation that would make it really easy to just spin up a new feature, which meant that we could get things done way faster. Faster not just because it was cross-platform, but also faster because we invested in making the technology itself really good. We worked with Felix, who's probably here somewhere, and pushed him to figure out how to do even more stuff with Block, because we really wanted to use that at the time. So it was just like really fun to be able to not just innovate for our product's sake, but also like push the technologies forward.
And impact on the business, right? I know this framework is sort of an evolutionary thing for you guys. Again, you want to convince your leadership and your business to do this. And how has this project, since it was, I think, a success, right? And you're getting a lot of benefits, how did that change the relationship of the engineering team with the rest of the organization and your confidence level to do things again in the future?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. This might just be in my own head, but whatever, you don't need to know that. But when we talk about doing other sort of tech debt investments or technology innovation at work now at Betterment, like it often comes up, like referring back to like, how did we do this when we did things with Flutter? Because from product people, from design people, they raise those kinds of questions because they see that as it was a successful thing that we did. It made a difference to them. One of the things we have called out here is like we adopted a design system on mobile. And so we were able to build, as part of like our training process, a lot of components to make it so it was really easy to just kind of like Lego brick assemble user experiences. And that has been a boon for our designers, who then get to say like, our product is consistent in the UI and the UX in ways that they love, right? Anyway, all that accumulates up to like tons of business value. We get to deliver a higher quality product, which our business stakeholders really like. We get to deliver it less expensively. I don't have any great numbers for you, but we did pull some data just to kind of show ourselves like how much or little time it was taking to build new features, and it was significantly less. Like we're talking about like half the time to deliver a feature, or less sometimes, than it took before. And that's not talking about half like in terms of multiple platforms, but just the actual production of a feature was so significantly less. We did a hackathon last year where one of the teams wanted to do like a mobile parody project, because I mentioned earlier, we got into this because we wanted to start doing things mobile first, which we've been more successful at, but not as successful as I think we still want to be. But what we found was that we could build features really fast on mobile, but we still had a ton of features on our web experience that we hadn't moved over to mobile yet. So, hackathon team, they had like 4 days or something. They were able to do like a whole feature a day, migrating it over. And we're not just talking about like one little dinky screen or a component over there. It was like multi-step flows and like interesting API interactions that they had to perform, rendering data, capturing new input from customers. Like they were able to do all of that, like a feature a day with like 2 or 3 people. And so that is just like, we never built those features on mobile before because it would have taken, I don't know, a week per feature at least, if not, 4 weeks sometimes. So it was a huge transformation for the way that we could ship things.
That's massive impact, right? And that's what you want. That's the result. And I think it's important to call out that a lot of what you described or talked about today is not just Flutter. Like Flutter didn't do those things automatically for you in terms of the business buy-in, the team buy-in, a lot of those aspects of it. It was the process you ran and being mindful about how you approach it. So I guess as we kind of think about wrapping up, it's been 5 years since you started that journey. And so what have you learned, and how do you think things have changed, and how has it changed your mind around how you pursue some of these technology transformations?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as you mentioned this morning, the elephant in the room, the Google, is Google going to kill it? I think what I've learned is like, well, they didn't kill it in those 5 years. So that was retrospectively maybe a thing not to be as worried about. But also like looking into the future, like I would definitely advise people to not weigh that so heavily. I think that, where we're at today, if we needed to do another transformation, like if you can pull that kind of transformation off once, you can definitely do it again. And you're probably not going to be doing it, with a gun to your head as you kind of imagine the scenario would look. It's probably going to be a slow change. It's also seemingly very unlikely to happen because as we've seen the community grow over the last 5 years, like there's so much more to the community than Google. They're not the whole thing. So that's a big piece of it for me when I look back on that. I think another piece of it is we have this one engineer. He has a different way of saying this that's a little bit more mean. But I like to say, what if it's not actually that hard? So one of the things that is always hard for people when they take on really big, ambiguous things like this is like that first step. And I coach people on this a lot, and it doesn't mean that I'm spectacularly good at it, but I do have my own experience to look back on and say like, well, I have actually taken a lot of these first steps. And like, I like to say that you never really know less than the moment before you start, right? That first step, you immediately get new information that you didn't have before. And so you need to find a way to convince yourself to start, to try it, to do the exploration, to install Flutter and just like try to start building a feature and figure out if there's something there. Because all the uncertainty that you produce for yourself, your lack of confidence that you can pull it off, it sort of just like immediately changes shape and goes away, a lot of it, when you get tactile, you get hands-on and you start doing things. And then I think the last piece of it that we spent a lot of time on is figuring out how to bring the business into it, making a plan with your business team, whoever they are, communicating to them that you see the steps that it will take to get the benefits that you're looking for, and that you're not going into it just like starry-eyed or with rose-colored glasses, that like there is a cost, right? We carved out a lot of time for that. So.
Yeah, I think, we hear about these concepts, measure what you can, learn, adapt, things like that. You think about that in terms of like lean startup, right? Yep. But this is about getting into the business. So that's all the time we have for today. There's a couple of resources wanted to call some attention to if you want to learn more. Sam has an awesome developer story that he expands on this a little bit. We've collaborated on a couple of other things around sort of some tips and trying to like distill this stuff into consumable content. So if you have a company you work for or a client or something like that, there's a white paper that we've written, and Sam and I did a webinar where we get into a lot of these things. And soon, we've actually recorded a podcast episode of this as well. So if you think that, oh my gosh, somebody else should have heard that talk with Sam and David, in addition to the video of this hopefully being posted one day, we're going to have an episode that's essentially what we just talked through as well. That'll be launching on our Build to Succeed podcast. So thank you all for, thanks to Sam, his contributions. Yes. Sam and Betterment have done a lot for the Flutter community. So thanks, Sam, and hopefully you can grab him and ask him a bunch of questions and do this for your own company. So thanks a ton.
Thanks, David.